Hello crafty friends, an extra long video today showing you the full process of me decorating my Christmas flip-flop journal. I've gathered all my different craft supplies. I have some Christmas die cuts, I have these little recipe cards and Christmas playing cards, and then I have this beautiful washi tape which I actually use quite a bit throughout the journal. I found it worked really well and I loved the style of it. And then a really big pile of papers and lots of bits and pieces. I'm not going to use everything in this pile, it's a lot of stuff, but I like to gather as much as possible in the theme that I'm doing, so I have more of a variety to choose as I'm decorating my journal. I'm also going to be using different elements from 3 different digital kits that I have printed out. There is one from NectarsCreations, there's one from BontikVintageDesigns, and then from Making and Creating. I will put all the links in the description box below. There's already this cute little pop-up house in the center of one of the signatures. I have a separate tutorial on how to create that, which I will link below. I don't really have a plan when I'm decorating my journals. I just sort of go with the flow and let the elements guide me where I'm going to put them. So I'm going to start with this little piece of vintage paper. It actually just fell out of the really big pile that I had. So I thought that'll suit the first little page. And then I'm going to fussy cut out around this washi tape. And then stick it down with the vintage paper. A very simple start. But we can add to it later if we feel we need to. This type of washi tape is like a sticker. It has like a backing paper, so it's easy to fussy cut out the designs that you want before you stick them down. And then I'm really loving this principle, so I want to use that somewhere. I'm thinking of cutting out little Santa that's in the train and using it on the very front cover of my journal. You'll notice I don't really measure things accurately usually, and I just tear things with a ruler. I don't really like straight edges. My style is more rustic and rough around the edges. I love things overspilling out of the pages, threads hanging off the page. So what I'm also doing is once I have cut the Santa out, I'm roughing up the edges all the way around. The cardstock that this is printed on is a little thicker than normal, so this roughing up works really well. I'm just using one side of a scissors, and as I run it up and down, it like frays the paper. And then I'm using a little bit of distress ink just to go all the way around to finish off that vintage look. I want to add something behind my Santa picture. I have this beautiful green Pagnola paper that I'm going to use. I'm just tearing that down to size. I'm going to leave the top and the bottom sticking out a bit so you can see it behind the main image. And because my entire journal is going to have that vintage feel, I'm going to rough up these edges too. I'm going to do that quite a bit throughout the decorating process of this journal. I've used glue stick to stick the Pagnola paper down, and then I'm using double-sided tape for the image. That's because the image is on a thicker cardstock and I'm feeling that the glue stick won't hold that well. So I'm going to use the double-sided tape, which is a bit more secure. To make sure that the left edge doesn't sort of start to peel off because it's right on the edge, I'm going to add a piece of my vintage tape to hold that down in place. Now the front cover of this little flip-flop journal is actually a handmade envelope. As you can see, the inside is the envelope, so there's a space to put a tag inside or something, so I'm going to put a little recipe card inside. To make it easier to put in and out of the little envelope, I'm going to add a little tab. I have a piece of coordinating paper that I'm going to machine stitch to the card. This card is not super vintage, but the whole journal is a little bit of a mix and match, so I think it goes really well and it fits really perfectly in my little envelope. I'm going to add some vintage tape to the little overlap sections of the envelope. I'm creating a little pocket for this page. I'm going to make it a double pocket. I'm using a color coordinating paper for the first piece, just tearing that down to size. And then my second piece, which will go in front, is actually a vellum. I've printed the kit, or this page from the kit, on a vellum. It's this beautiful red that I really like. So I'm just going to cut that down smaller, not the exact size of how my envelope is going to be. And then I'm going to machine stitch all the way around and then trim off the excess vellum. A tip I have shared before, if you're sewing vellum or even acetate onto another paper, always have it bigger than what you need. It makes it much easier to sew that with the machine. If it's the exact size, it does tend to slip here and there and it might not have the exact edge. It's just easier to make it bigger and then trim it later. Once my pocket is ready, I'm then going to attach it to the page using craft glue. As I decorate this journal, you'll see me flapping the pages back and forth. I will revisit pages I've already done. Sometimes it is to just check elements that I've put in there so that I can repeat them on other pages. Other times it's to add something. I never just go sort of in a systematic way from beginning to end decorating. I go back and forth. Sometimes I'll just pop to the back and do a couple of pages there. It all just depends where the inspiration takes me. So you will see a lot of flipping and flopping back and forth with this journal. And all my other journals for that case. I really love adding stenciling to my journals. It adds a little bit of a touch of color without overdoing the page. Here I'm using a green distress ink with my botanical stencil. I know I'm going to get questions about the stencil, and unfortunately I cannot get hold of it anymore. I had bought it quite a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, from the Reject shop here in Australia, and I've never ever found it again. I am quite sad I didn't just buy everything that was available on the rack at the time, because mine is starting to show a little bit of wear and I cannot find another one, and it is my favorite. Adding another pocket to this page, I'm using a beautiful red cardstock and I'm doing the pocket vertically this time. And then I have this die cut that says Christmas, which fits perfectly. I'm going to add that to the pocket, but roughing up the edges first. To attach it to the pocket, I'm going to machine stitch it, just one line all the way down from top to bottom, and then just the little letter T sticking out a bit. So I'm just going to put that down with some glue stick so it doesn't tear off and get damaged. I'm then going to attach the pocket again with craft glue. I'm not going to talk throughout the entire video. I don't believe in talking just for the sake of talking to fill space. I'd rather you just watch and enjoy and hopefully be inspired. So I will talk where there is something to say about maybe my process, but there will be times where it is quiet. I also don't play music as there's just so much copyright going out at the moment, and also to find big chunks of music to play in a 1-hour video is pretty time consuming. So I'm just going to leave it in silence. Feel free to play your favorite podcast or your music in the background. I'm now going to prepare some tags that I can pop in my pockets. These printables are from BontikVintageDesigns. And what I'm going to do is, because I've just printed them on the regular copy paper, which is 80 GSM, I want them a bit sturdier. So I'm going to stick them onto a piece of cardstock. I tend to use a cardstock that is sort of matching the theme, so that when you turn it over, it has got a color coordinated finish, and the cardstock makes the card sturdier. You could prepare all your tags before you start. I like to do mine as I go because I don't always use every single tag in a kit. I sort of see what fits where, and then I save the others for another time. But you could also just prepare everything before you start, so you're a little bit more organized. I also like to round the edges on some just for a point of difference. Some I leave as is, some I use my corner round punch. And once the glue is dry on my pockets, I'm going to start adding the little tags and other elements inside. I tend to overstuff my pockets, but I do like them like that. Some people say less is more, I say more is more. I like my pockets and my journals chunky. Along with the printed tags, I'm also using ready-made tags throughout and other little tickets and bits of ephemera that I have. I always love the rough end left when you tear paper out of a spiral book, and I always leave that in for my projects. This is a piece from an old diary, and I've just torn a piece that's quite plain. I folded it in half, and that's going to be part of my pocket filler. I'm going to add another little tag here. I'm just going to attach it to the recipe card with a paper clip, and then I'm going to slip it into the envelope, leaving the tag on the outside of the envelope while the recipe goes in, so there's more to see when you turn the page. Here I'm going to add a piece of lace to the paper edge. I'm going to stick it on so some of it is off the page so it sticks out when you close the book. And for this too, I'm using liquid craft glue. I'm going to make a snippet strip. I use this almost in every journal, and I put at least 2 or 3 depending on the size of the journal. I think this is a great way to incorporate all the different colors and elements of your journal into one. I use all different bits that I have, and I like to use paper that I've used perhaps for the pockets or for the tags and tear those up and use them in the snippet strip as well. I just find this is a great way to make everything cohesive and so that everything is matching and blending from one page to the other throughout the journal. For me personally, I don't like where every single page is different and nothing is repeated. I like cohesion throughout my journal. For my snippet strip, I have one long strip that's going to be the base. And then I cut up all my little bits that I'm going to use, and then I use a sewing machine to run down to attach all the bits. And an easy way to do that is just to keep everything to the side of your sewing machine. It's difficult to obviously hold everything together. And after you've stitched the first 2, as you're sewing, you slip the next paper underneath the foot. Of course, if you don't have a sewing machine, you can always glue them down. And I'm going to attach my snippet strip to my paper using the hot glue gun. You could also use double-sided tape or craft glue. For additional interest, I do add the vintage tape here and there throughout the journal. If you'd like to make your own vintage tape, I'll put a link to the tutorial in the description box below. Going to add a little bit of an embellishment stack on this page. I've done my stenciling. I'm now doing some stamping with some vintage text with some black ink, and I'm going to add a little bit of the red paper which I used previously in the pocket, and then I'm putting a sticker down, some cheesecloth for texture, and then I have a piece of that paper with the little berries on, the same one that I used as the tab for my recipe card. As you can see how I'm repeating elements, and once I'm happy with all the little elements, I'm going to stick those down. I thought about placing a ready-made wax seal here, but then I decided it wouldn't really suit it, so I popped it onto my snippet strip where it looked much better. These ready-made wax seals are available from Taperlogy. I'll have all the details in the description box below. Another little pocket using a piece of the diary. It really is anything goes in this journal. Although I'm not stitching anything together, I did stitch around the pocket just for additional texture. fussy cutting another piece of the beautiful washi tape, and then I need to decide where I'm going to put it. As I'm moving that around, I decide it's going to make a really beautiful corner pocket, but the corner pocket will first need a base. So I've gone through a couple of options. I'm going to keep it white as I think the washi tape design will really pop. So I'm going to just roughly measure and tear my corner pocket that I'm going to put, and I'm feeling it's a little plain, so I'm going to add some doily over it just to give it additional texture and interest. I'm using a glue stick to attach the doily to the paper. I love the little scalloped edge it has left, and then I'm going to put my washi tape design over the top of that. Some of the leaves on the right are sticking out a little bit. I don't want to fold them over. I want them to stay. So I'm going to just put a piece of doily just behind that so they've got something to stick to, and then they won't stick to the background paper. When I first created this journal, I didn't have a Christmas theme in mind. I either was going to make it a travel journal or a mermaid journal. So now that it's going to be a Christmas journal, there's nothing really Christmassy in it besides the things I've already put in. So I want some of the pages to look Christmassy, as if I had built the journal originally with Christmas papers. So what I'm doing is I'm using the printables that I have, and I'm going to stick some of those just directly flat onto some of the pages to look like they were already created with the kit, if that makes sense. And I'm just using a glue stick to stick those down, and I'm going to then just trim them down to size. This kit pictured here is from NectarsCreations. I'm going to do the same with other different printables in some additional pages, so I'm just going to let the video run for a little while until I do the next thing in my process. This printable I'm using here is from BontikVintageDesigns. As this is Santa's letterbox, I'm going to take a small envelope and just address it to Santa and place a little stamp, and then I want to attach that to the page with a paper clip. Later on, I'm going to add little ephemera elements, stamps and stickers inside the envelope. On this one, I tore a little bit of the paper, so the under white was showing, which I didn't like, so I'm just going to trim that smaller. I'm just drawing a line with a pencil so I can go straight, and then just snipping it with the scissors and tearing off the end. And then you wouldn't even know there was a problem before. If you're wondering how this journal is slipping and flopping in all directions, it is a flip-flop journal. So there's 3 signatures on the one side and 2 signatures on the other. If you'd like to see how one of these is made, so you could make one yourself, I have a full detailed tutorial, which I will link below. As you can see, the cardstock was of suitcases, as it was going to be my travel journal. So now it is going to be pasted over with some Christmas paper. We'll leave the travel journal for another time. I have the small piece of printable left over that I'm going to use. I'm going to paste it across both pages horizontally. It'll be a lovely little journal spot. I'm just sticking that down with a glue stick, and then I'm going to add a little bit of decoration just to enhance it just a bit. These are rub-on stickers from Taperlogy. I'll put a link in the description box below. They have a full range of Christmas themed ones. Difficult to see on the video, but these are little stars. I'm using something bold to fill this pocket so it has a beautiful contrast. I have this black letter to Santa from the NectarsCreations printable, and I'm going to stick that onto a cardstock to make it more sturdy and then pop it into my pocket. I love the contrast it's creating. I'm not loving the blue for this journal. It just doesn't suit the theme. I thought I could do something with it, but I really don't like the blue. It's causing a problem for me, so I'm going to cover that up. I'm folding the left page in half. I'm going to make it into a pocket of sorts. So I'm going to first stick that down so it is the bottom part of my pocket, and then I'm going to use the printable to create a background for the pocket, and it's going to cover up the entire blue. On the pocket itself, I'm going to do some stamping, again using my vintage script stamp and black permanent ink. Going to add another piece from the washi tape, a really large piece this time, across most of the pocket. I'm not really liking this white page either. I want to cover that up. I'm going to use a piece of dress pattern tissue paper, which is a beautiful vintage color. I'm not going to cut it exactly onto the page to fit. I want it to spill over a little bit onto the other page. And then I'm going to add another pocket to the right. Again, just using a piece of scrap paper. I like it uneven and just torn the edges to fit the size. And then enhancing the page with some more of the washi tape stickies. I'm going to make a really big journaling card from this printable, more like a postcard. I wanted to fill the entire pocket and be like a background for this page. I'm really loving this Santa, so I'm going to put him onto a baking cardstock to make it more sturdy, and then I'm going to stitch all the way around it with some green thread and make some messy stitching to give it some dimension and texture. I add one of these little receipts into every one of my journals. They're each numbered. And then in the actual receipt book that's left behind, I will write what the journal is. It's a way for me to keep count of how many journals I've made. And it's an additional piece of ephemera to add to the journal. Again, I'm not loving this blue. I'm going to cover it up with something a bit more Christmassy. I was going to add a pocket to the back of this page, but then I decided to add a piece of that beautiful green pianola paper, as it will just connect through as I've used it in other places in the journal, and I've left it quite rough and uneven on the top and the bottom. I just like that to be always not so straight, and then I'm going to add the pocket to the right hand side. I then decided to use the Father Christmas not as a journal card but as an element on a page, so I'm just sticking that down directly onto the page using some double-sided tape. I've added that Christmas tree scene over a piece of the vintage dress pattern paper, and I'm also going to add a little numbered sticker. Here I'm going to add a vintage library card pocket. I'm going to use one of these, which is a little Christmas bird with some berries. This is from Making and Creating, and I'm going to make the tag quite long, sort of, it's going to look a little bit like a bookmark, and I'm going to pop that into my little library pocket. I want to make a little embellishment cluster on this page, so I'm just sifting through all the bits and pieces on my desk to find the perfect bits that are going to go together. I have this word that's got the dictionary meaning printed that I'm going to use, and then I'm cutting out some of the bits of the washi tape to add around it. I tend to move pieces around quite a bit. I add and remove until I can find something that's balanced and that I'm happy with. And once I'm happy with it, I start to glue things down. I will now start at the beginning again and page through and just see where I would like to add more elements or where there's maybe too many blank spaces and I'd like to fill something in. I do this process quite a few times where I start from the beginning and page through and add as I go. That is how I fill my journal and build up the pages and elements. I like my pockets pretty full, so I'm finding lots of little tags and ephemera and bits to put into this pocket. I like adding fabric and lots of Hessian string bows onto my tags to make them a little bit more bulky and add more texture. Thinking of adding some decoration to this pocket, I'm just trying a few different elements. I really like this 25, and then I see that it goes really well with a piece of the washi tape that fits perfectly inside, so I may actually use that on a separate page. I have a little leaf die cut that I'm going to add a piece of, and then normally when I like to add a little bit of color, just a touch of color, I use a coordinated colored thread, just the type of thread you use for your sewing machine, and I just crumple it up underneath one of the elements and let it stick out here and there, and I think that adds really nice color in a very subtle way. I'm going to add a piece of ruffled fabric on this page. I just have a piece of chiffon fabric that is frayed on the end, and I'm just going to sort of crumple that up and push it under the foot of the sewing machine so it creates this beautiful ruffle, and then I'm going to attach it to the page using some glue. Looks like I'm going to get back to that. Not sure why I left that at that point. I'm now going to add that washi tape circle wreath type thing with the 25 in the middle, and I'm going to leave it by itself on the page. I like it just the way it is. Another way I like to add color and interest to my pages is by adding tabs. I use papers or fabric that I've used throughout the journal. I just cut a piece and fold it in half, and then either staple it, use double-sided tape or glue to attach it to the edge of a page. Always close the book before you glue anything there where your tab is, just to make sure it's not sticking out too much from the other pages. I'm going to go ahead and put some more tags onto backing cardstock and cutting those out. I'm going to do quite a few because I've got quite a few pockets to fill now. There's quite a few. I'm going to cut the corners and shape them and punch holes where needed, and then page through the journal and stuff the pockets. I'm going to also attach some onto the page edges with some paper clips. Oh, I was waiting for the glue gun to heat up before I stuck the fabric down. Going to add another little pocket here. I've cut it at an angle, again using a piece of the printable. And covering up more of that dreaded blue. Here I'm going to make a little, I don't know if it's called a waterfall notebook, but it's a couple of pages at different lengths that are attached at the top, like a notepad that you stick down onto a page, and you can sort of flip it up and write on each of the pages. I like to use different designs for this, and normally I like to stitch the top with the sewing machine, or you could also use a piece of tape, or you could also staple it. I'm going to stick mine flat onto the page so that the last page is actually stuck down so you don't have the white underneath. If you choose, you could make the last page flap up too. On this page, I'm going to add another cluster. And on the back page, I'm going to add this beautiful image. A double pocket here with a Christmas printable and a piece of embossed vellum. This was about all that I could fit in this video. If you'd like to see the completed journal, I do have a flip through. I will link that video below. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I'm not quite sure if you made it all the way to the end, but good on you if you did. I hope you were inspired for decorating your journals. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Happy creating, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.